Hey YouTube, Spider0804 here, and today we will be learning how to make an engine. Not just any engine, but pretty much any engine that you ever want to make. The first thing about making a good engine, I've found, is a central prop design. If you don't know that phrase, it is building everything around a central prop, and then everything else is just for visual. Like, some of you people out there I know are welding all of these props together, and it's laggy as heck, but how I build is those are all parented. If you don't know what parenting is, there is a tutorial by angVel out there. Now, all these props here, these are the physical props. These are the only props that actually do something. Like these are the flaps, these are the ailerons, the rudder, the elevator, the stabilizers, and of course the engines. Now these crankshafts are both connected to this central prop. The central prop weighs the most, and it makes for really, really strong constraints. These are the lifting surfaces. If you're not building like this, I really suggest that you switch to building like this. Like on my old planes, I had crankshafts here that were welded to a central prop. Not nearly as good as just having a central prop and then a crankshaft connected to that. Now, we're going to be building an inline 5 today, just because it's kind of a difficult engine to do. Difficult engine to do well, correctly. So, first we're going to need a base plate. I have a 30x120 here. Then we're going to need a crankshaft. I'm going to use a 9x30. Now, the bigger your crankshaft is, the more torque it will have. Rather, the bigger your stroke is. I'm going to be constraining the ropes for my pistons directly to the top of the crankshaft, so I'm going to have a stroke of 9. The bigger the stroke is, the more torque you have, but the smaller the stroke is, the engine will be a little bit more manageable. I guess you could say stable. If you're using a transmission or something like that, you might want to switch down to 6 or even 3. But since I mostly do planes and I need massive amount of torque, and top-end RPM isn't really that important to me, I'm using 9. Now I'm going to no-collide these, and we are going to need some thrusters. Now you can choose any thruster model you want. To do that, you just find the thruster model you want. Like, I want this 6x6 tube here. I right-click, copy to clipboard, and then I type wire_thruster_model, and then I hit space and Control plus V, as in, I don't know, vehicle. And now I have my thruster. That command will change the thruster to whatever model you copy, if you didn't get that. I'm going to no-collide this. I'm going to weight these, maybe 250 for my main prop. Maybe, let's just go 100 for the kicks. 100 for the crankshaft, and 1 for the pistons. On my cub, I actually used 1 on the pistons and 50 on the crankshaft, so it just varies. Find out what works for you. Now, I'm going to connect, well, I'm not going to connect, I'm going to move my crankshaft to my my main plate there. I'm going to move my piston to the center of my crank right there. I need a couple more pistons. And I'm going to position them like so. Now I'm going to mirror. I'm just doing this to show you how to mirror in case you don't. Click hit pose plus hit normal. It's on the green. It says plane, hit pose plus hit normal. In the center of your middle piston, and click hit normal, and click in the direction that you actually want to mirror. Then you hit R to bring up the menu, go to rotation functions, click mirror across plane, select plane 1, hold shift, it's important, hold shift and click rotate entity. See how it mirrored it across this plane? This box right here is what it mirrors across. So now I have 5 pistons. I'm going to delete my plane. Now, for this isn't good. These pistons, they're so close to the crankshaft that when they come down on the bottom of the stroke, it's fairly likely that they will shoot through to the bottom. And some people use constraining ropes to make sure that doesn't happen. But I like to build things as simply as possible just because it's easier and you don't have the pistons trying to fight against each other all the time. So what I do is I look at the crank and I see that it's 9 wide, and I generally divide that by half. Now for 3, I might actually use 3. Like if the crank was 3 wide, I might stick with a 3 space. But for like 9 and 6, I use 3 and 4.5. If you don't know what that means, this S prop is 30 long. Each one of these sections here is 6. You see 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. Now if you go into precision and you uncheck push-pull as percent and you set it to 4.5, these units are the same as the S prop units. So I just pulled it by 4.5 Gmod or S props units. Now this is the bottom of our stroke. This is the lowest that the pistons will possibly go. But I constrain from the top of the stroke, the highest the pistons will possibly go. So how do we do that? We know that our crankshaft is 9 tall or 9 wide. So I'm changing from 4.5 to 9 on the push-pull amount. Like so. I'm just going to make sure everything's no collided here. See, my pistons are. Alright. Now we need we have our physical props there. This is the entire engine system minus the E2. So now I need an E2. Now I don't actually use GPS timing anymore. It's a little bit outdated, and I don't. You'll see it when I show you the chip, but a lot of stuff has changed based on how I do engines. So you can put this chip anywhere. Just for convenience of this video, I'm going to put the chip right above the crank. But like, if you have a box where all of your E2s goes, just put it there. Now this E2 is fairly complex but simple at the same time. It has 4 inputs: on, throttle, crankshaft, and marker. It has the outputs. The outputs are variable based on what your engine is, but we're going to have 5 thrusters, or 5 pistons rather. So I'm adding T4 and T5. I'm going to copy this line over. Oop. I'm taking the T3 line and I'm copying it down. I'll change this to T4 and T5. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see all of this writing with the resolution that I recorded and edited in, but if you can, that's great. You might be able to see it in 720p, but if you can't, just try and follow along by looking at the E2. Now basically what this does is it marks your crankshaft as an entity, and it gets the bearing from it. This eliminates the need for a GPS. And how we do that is we get its bearing relative to a marker. Well, what is the marker? The marker can be anything. So you go crankshaft wirelink to the crankshaft, marker to, I don't know, the baseplate. And then you want to debugger it. You want to debugger the E2, and you want the bearing to be 0. So if the bearing isn't 0, you want it to be like, you want to rotate it until it is 0. Like you can see 72. You might not actually be able to see that, but the bearing is changing when I'm rotating it. You don't need it to be exactly 0. If it's like 0.01 or 0.02, it's close enough. Now for the actual E2 programming, I guess you could say, we want 5 pistons. Now, we know that a full rotation is 360 degrees. The first piston starts at 0, always when I build engines. The second piston will be 72 degrees, so I put in plus 72 there. The third piston will be, what is that, 144? The fourth piston will be, oh, I'm blanking here, 216. And the fifth piston will be 288. So these are when the pistons are going to fire, every 72 degrees. We're adding 72 for every single one. I know in my older tutorials it was a little confusing because I was like, if between this and this. That's outdated now. Now, what this function here does, sin, it's a sine wave. Basically what it does is it gives the piston more power when it's more advantageous and less power when it's less advantageous. In the short run, like if I could TLDR this for you, it'll stop your pistons from glitching through the crankshaft massively, and it'll help with power. It makes the engine a lot smoother too. Another way I could put it is like conventional engine building. At the top of the stroke, your piston goes from like negative 1,000 to a positive 1,000. And it's got all this momentum, and it's like, oh, I need to go up here, and then suddenly it changes its force, and suddenly it wants to go down here really bad. That's just, like, that amount of momentum, it doesn't make your engine as smooth. So if the amount of force lessens when it gets to the top, and then it just piles it on when it needs to go down, it's better. It doesn't create snappy movements for the piston. Alright, so we have all of our physical props that we need. We're going to want to axis center our crankshaft to our main prop. And also we're going to want another one of the crankshaft models. So I'm just duping this and then removing it with the R button and then duping that. Why do we want that? You'll find out later. Okay, first off, we are going to want to do our axising. And to do that, we're going to want to mass center 0.1 on our main prop, mass center 0.2, and make blue our first piston. Now, we need to find out which way is towards the back, like back here, from the piston. So what you do is you have relative to entity checked, you make sure your piston's blue, and then you find out which way is back. I already know which way is back, but you might have to play with it a little bit. Do it for 0.2 first. I did it for 0.1 first. It really doesn't matter, but we're trying to figure out 0.2 right now. So we know that negative 200 Y is back for that piston. In fact, it's going to be for all those pistons because I, duped. Okay, now I'm going to zero these out, and I want to figure out which way is down halfway of the stroke. What I mean by that is our crankshaft is 9 wide or 9 tall, however you look at it. And I want our axis to be halfway through the stroke so that it's straight up and down halfway through the stroke. If I constrain from here, when it's at the top, it's going to be straight up and down, but when it's at the bottom, it's going to be more curved. It's going to be really curved. But if I have it in the middle, at the top it's going to be a little curved, at the bottom it's going to be a little curved, and in the middle it'll be nice and straight. So, you find out which way is down by 4.5. If you're using a 6 size crankshaft, you would want to do down by 3. You just half your crankshaft. So right here, I know that negative 4.5 Z is halfway down. Now I add the negative 200 to it for Y, and there's the point for 2. I'm going to set my point 1 there as well, so you can see how this looks. If you don't have a green line coming from here to there, and a green line coming from here to there, you are wrong. Okay, now our point 1, we want to add 1 or minus 1 to x, like this. Because we know by process of elimination, if z is up and down, and y is forward and backwards, then x is left and right. So you can see it's just left a tiny bit. And you got to think of it like a hinge. It's going to create an axis between this point and this point. So if I go to constraints and I make an axis, it should be should make a nice big circle like that. Now we want to do it for our next piston. So mass center point 2, right click on piston 2. Set your point 1 and point 2. You take away the x from 1 to 0. You can see it looks the same. Create constraint. Piston 3, set 2. To get your 1, you add 1 or minus 1, whatever you did. And then piston 4. Now I realize this way differs how I showed of doing it before. That's because just over time I've found ways of doing things easier. Now, if you've done this right, your pistons should be, they should just all make a nice big happy circle, like so. Now, we are going to get, right now we are finished with constraining our pistons, and our crankshaft should be axised and everything should be happy there. Now we're going to start with the actual constraining of the pistons to the crankshaft with ropes. Now for me, I make my crankshaft some color that I don't ever use, that's easily identifiable from the precision axis blue. So whatever you do, just don't pick this color. Now you want to fading doors on the fading doors tool. You want to fading doors the crankshaft with one key, whatever you want, and fading doors this with another key. From now on, we are going to call this marker. This is our marker. You'll find out in a little bit why. You want to move the marker next to the crankshaft. And you want to keep it blue. Now, the reason for this marker is this first piston would be awfully easy to do, to figure out this position to here, but we're going to rotate it 72 degrees, and it's going to be hard to figure out where our point needs to go on here. Like, I can demonstrate this. So I rotated it 72 degrees. You could try and just click a rope from there to there, but it's not going to be very precise. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this marker, and it's always going to stay upright like this. And it'll be much easier to show where the point goes. Now we want point 1 mass center on here, and point 2 mass center on our first piston. Now what we're going to do, since we know we need this point, I'll just use a comma. We know we need it to be there. We're going to find that point on here. Now we need to find, first off, we know the crankshaft is 9 wide or tall, however you look at it. We need to find the top of the crankshaft. So I'm going to zero these out. To do that, you take half the crankshaft and you just kind of play with it a little bit. So this went left. So now I know that Z is left. I'm going to try Y. Y came back to me. Minus 4.5x turned out to be the top of this, as you can see here. Now for to get our point over here, we knew that negative z was left, so positive z is right. Well, how do we get it exact? We want it to be exactly in the middle between these two lines over here, so between there and there. The good thing about S-props is we know this is 30 long, so each half of these sections is 3. So 0, 3, 6, 9, 12. So we know we want our Z to be 12. And you can see the point is right where we want it. Now I'm just going to put that inside of there. And if I fade the crankshaft, you can see it's in there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get our precision alignment tool out. We're going to hit R. We're going to hit set. If you don't understand what's going on here, I can demonstrate. Now you see how the point is actually coming from the crankshaft to there. Like if I hit this again, it's coming from the crankshaft to the marker. We are setting the point from the crankshaft relative to the marker. So if your green line is starting here, you did it wrong. Point 1 needs to come from here to wherever we want on the marker. So I'm going to put that inside of there. And I'm just going to hit set. And our point 2 is already set because we always constrain our ropes from the center of the piston. Point 1, point 2 for the ropes. Make sure it's rigid with whatever you want. Make it whatever type you want. And that constraint is done. Now I'm going to fade my marker. I'm going to rotate the engine 72 degrees. Now I can fade my crankshaft and unfade the marker just to show. We want the point to be here for this one. So 3, 6. Go back to points. Don't click anything, just change the 12 to 6. And I can fade the marker again and bring up the crankshaft. You hit R, go to constraints, make sure your point 2 is mass center on your piston 2. Make the constraint. Now we don't need to unfade the marker every time. We can just unfade it and delete it later. So we go to precision alignment, set your point to piston 3, because we rotated, we're doing piston 3 now. Points, 0, because it's in the center of the prop. You can see right there, it's in the center. Constraints, make your rope. We're going to rotate again. Back to precision alignment. And now we're going past the middle of the prop. So now we know it's -6. Why do we know that? Because this was 12, this was 6, this was 0, -6, -12. Simple enough. Change your point 2 to the piston that we're working on, which is piston 4. I made my rope. And we rotate it to the right again. And then we want our point to change to -12. And we want to change our point 2 to piston 5. And we will rotate it one final time to get this to be straight up and down, because that is our piston 1. And we want our bearing on this to be 0. Now, I'm going to remove my marker. We don't need the marker anymore. And if you get really anal, you can just right click the crankshaft after you're done doing this, and you can go to get angles, and you can set these how you want them. Alright. Okay, everything's constrained here. We're going to start dealing with wiring. So we want a numpad input with a value of 1 when it's on. An advanced input. I chose maximum 10,000, start at 0, minimum 0, change per second 100. And then I always use 8 and 2 on a numpad for increasing and decreasing. I always use 5 for a numpad input. You also want a sound emitter with some sort of engine sound. Why do you want a sound emitter? It's really easy to tell if an engine is balanced or not based on a sound emitter. We're going to wire throttle to our advanced input, on to our numpad input, and then we want pitch relative on the speaker to go to SP on the chip. I'll probably rewrite that to SoundPitch just for simplicity for you guys. We want A from the speaker to go to the numpad input. Now, we want to give it a little bit of throttle, so I hit 5 to turn it on. I'm hitting 8 just to give it a little bit of throttle. You can see T1 is 0. So we know that T1 is thruster, or piston 1, because this is straight up and down. This is at the very top of its stroke. And T1 is 0. So naturally, A to T1. Now our engine turns right, if you've been following with the tutorial anyway. But what happened there? Well, T5 is now 0. The reason for this, if this happens to you, the reason for this is that the bearing increases as it goes to the right, and it decreases as it goes to the left. You can either wire this how you want, so like when I turn this 72 degrees to the right, T5 is 0, so piston 2 would be wired to T5. But if you're really anal and you want like piston 2 to be T2 and all that good stuff, well, then I need to reverse my stuff. So actually, before I do that, I'll go ahead and demonstrate this. So if I turn to the right, T5 is 0. This is straight up and down. So this would be wired to T5. If I turn it to the right again, T3 or T4 is 0. And piston 3 is straight up and down. So I would have to wire that. And because this T5 was 0 last turn, T4 was 0 this turn, we know that it's going to go T5, T4, T3, T2, T1. Like I said, if you're really anal about stuff like that and you want T1 to be piston 1 and T2 to be piston 2, you're just going to need to reverse these. So T2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm just cutting these. Control X is the cut key, by the way. Kind of a useful key. When I paste this up, it'll actually look like this. You won't have to do any of this, but it's just useful information for you guys. So T1 is 0. And if I turn it, T2 is 0. Turn it again, T3 is 0. So I can wire it up like that. It's kind of useful to have your thrusters actually wired like that. So hopefully I explained it pretty good. If I didn't, just play with it, figure it out. So I wired all my stuff up correctly. Piston 2, T2, piston 3, T3. You know, I'll probably change it in the E2 from T to P, or I'll actually write in piston. I'll do some optimization. It'll make it easy to see. But if I debugger this, go to wire debugger, I should just be able to see it drive. Now, I keep debuggering the crankshaft because that's like what I'm used to. Maybe we want a different engine sound, because that one, it kind of sounds like a vacuum cleaner and it's not that easy to tell. I'll just use this because I've used this before. Ooh. You can see it runs pretty good. Sounds pretty stable. There's no misses in there. The RPM right now is slowly falling because I really don't have any throttle on there. If I give it some throttle, it's up at 1,000 RPM, no problem. 1,100, 1,200. Now it's getting a little wonky at like 1,200. But like I was saying with building before, the reason we put that 4.5 space here is look at the pistons. They are just trying to glitch through. See? They're trying to push their way through. The more power you give them, the more they'll try and push through. But yeah, looks pretty good. stable up to 1,000. There we go. Now, no one actually asked for this tutorial, but I felt it was necessary because the way I build engines has like come along a massive amount in just the past week or so. So I hope that this helps you guys a lot, and that it makes your engines a lot better. Anyway, that's the engine tutorial. If you had trouble anywhere, ask. I might be able to help you, but I'm pretty confident that I explained everything in the tutorial as well as I am able. If you're interested in radial engines at all, just stay tuned, and I'll show you how to do that quick. I'm not actually going to make one, but I'm just going to explain how you get the pistons where you want them. Okay, for radials, I have found a really easy way to do them. Like, I'm just talking about piston, like where you put the pistons, how you get them where you want them. Because it can be pretty hard to do, like a 5-cylinder or a 9-cylinder. All I do is I put that there, and then I pull by 4.5 because of the reasons stated before. Actually, we know that we're going to pull by 9 and 4.5, so 13.5. Pulling. Now all I do is I just dupe this, I weld this to here, then I go turn 72 degrees, freeze it, and then R with the weld key, put this back, then I advance dupe again, weld that on there, 2 turns, that goes down there, unweld that, and then dupe, weld, turn, dupe, weld, turn, and dupe. Then I just undo my welds. Okay, so that right there is a 5-cylinder radial setup. If you wanted to do a multi-bank, just weld these, and then you dupe the entire thing. I'm going to actually get rid of this. I'm going to undo the axis on this. Dupe this, and then you push this back 6 or however far you want, and then you rotate it. Let's just say this is 2 banks. Going to rotate it 180 degrees. Just unfreeze all these. And freeze these. And then remove this. And dupe in the original location. So that there is a 2-bank, 5-cylinder per bank radial engine. Can't really see it, but it's there. Yeah, makes it really easy. I've actually had people ask me about radial engines, so that's how you do them. It's pretty simple. Anyway, yeah, thanks for staying tuned, and have a good one.